When elephants could fly. Long ago, when the world was young, elephants were a lot like they are today, except for one thing. Elephants had wings. Not small, dainty butterfly-type wings. An elephant couldn't fly with those. No, these elephants had proper wings, enormous elephant wings, and everywhere you looked, flocks of elephants swooped and soared and flapped and fluttered, flying through the sky like elephants with wings. Now remember, the world was new and there was still a lot of work to do to make all the things we see today. So the King of Nature put all the elephants to work. They hauled stones to make the mountains and dug trenches for the rivers. And they flew all over the world, planting seeds and trees and carrying water for the lakes that were stored in their trunks. Finally, all the work was done, and there was nothing left for the elephants to do. At first the elephants were happy. With no jobs to do, there was more time for flying and racing with ducks on their long flight south. But after a while, the elephants got bored. They tried playing games like Pin the Tail on the Mouse and What's the Time, Mr. Water Buffalo? But the mice were too busy eating grain, and the water buffalo just snorted haughtily.
Silly elephants!
Soon the elephants started looking for other things to do, but in doing so they became very annoying. They'd get up before dawn and crow like cocks and roosters, waking everyone in all the villages for miles around. Huh? What? Is it morning already?
No, it's those silly elephants.
Or they'd spend hours playing catch with gigantic stone boulders. And the crashing of the giant rocks would scare all the animals and send the people into a panic. Is it a volcano?
No, it's just the elephants again.
And sometimes, tired of crowing and throwing rocks, the elephants would sit around on rooftops and trees and anything too slow to get out of their way. It seemed like everyone knew how heavy the elephants were, except for the elephants themselves. But like spoiled children, the elephants couldn't care less about the trouble they were causing others. They just wanted to have fun. Finally, all the people and the other animals came to see the King of Nature.
We love this world you've made, but these flying elephants are simply too much.
They flatten our houses.
And squash all our crops. And the other day, they almost sat on my grandmother. They all pleaded for help, and the great king, being extremely wise, knew what had to be done. The next day, the decree went out.
All elephants are hereby invited to a most fantastic feast.
A feast! The elephants could hardly believe their ears. Word spread, and soon the sky grew dark with elephants flying in from all over India. And what a feast it was! There were meats from the tandoor and curries of every flavour, milk dumplings and saffron yogurt, sweet treats and steaming rice, and platters of fruit so high there were clouds at the top. And to wash it all down, spring water and fresh juices and steaming urns of the finest teas that any elephant had ever tasted. The elephants ate and drank, then ate some more, and finally they all fell asleep. That was the moment the King of Nature was waiting for. And with one stroke, he made all the wings leave the elephants' bodies. All, that is, except 4. 2 of these wings he gave to the peacock, and that is how the bird got its magnificent tail. And the other 2 wings he stuck on the banana tree, and that's why it has such beautiful big leaves. When the elephants woke, they discovered their loss. But no matter how loudly they trumpeted, their wings were gone forever. Angry and upset, the elephants ran off into the jungle. At last, everyone else could now enjoy their lives in peace. But to this day, you'll sometimes see a sad look in an elephant's eye. That's because they're dreaming of the time when elephants could fly.
The Brave Little Tailor. In a little town, in a little shop, there lived a little tailor. Though a tailor by trade, he was a dreamer by nature, and he spent his days sewing shirts, eating jam, and daydreaming of heroic adventures. One day, while eating and imagining himself rescuing a beautiful princess, some flies buzzed in and rudely interrupted his thoughts. Pesky flies! Get away from my supper! To his amazement, all 7 flies fell to the table completely lifeless. Incredible! 7 in one blow! So proud was the tailor of his mighty feat that he decided he must tell the whole world about it. He set off down the road and, to his delight, found an old lump of cheese which he put straight into his pocket. Shortly after, he found a bird stuck in a thicket. He put that in his pocket too. The tailor continued on, feeling very pleased with himself. Then he met a giant blocking his way. "Greetings, friend giant. Would you join me on my travels?"
Travel with you, a silly little tailor?
The tailor stood tall and proud. "A tailor I may be, but I've killed 7 at one blow."
7? You?
Of course, the giant thought the tailor was talking about 7 men, not 7 flies. So he decided to find out just how strong the tailor really was. The giant picked up a rock and crushed it in his hand.
Now let's see you do that.
The smart little tailor quickly took the cheese from his pocket and pretended it was a rock. "Crushing rocks is child's play. I can squeeze water from mine." And he squeezed the cheese with all his might until it squished in his hand. The giant growled deep within. He hated being beaten, especially by a puny tailor.
Let's see how far you can throw then.
And with that, the giant picked up a stone and threw it far away. Not bad, but I see it fell to the ground. Anything I throw will never fall at all." And so saying, the tailor took the bird from his pocket and cast it into the air. Happy to be free, the bird flew far away until it was completely out of sight. Now the giant was furious.
Strong are you, Master Tailor? Then let's you and me carry this tree.
The little tailor just shrugged. "After you, my giant friend." The giant turned and, straining with all his might, picked up one end and set off. But with the giant walking in front, he couldn't see the little man behind. So the tailor jumped aboard and enjoyed the ride. Up hill and down dale, the giant carried the tree and the little tailor. Finally, he could go no further. "Stopped already? I feel like I carry nothing at all." The giant bowed low before the little tailor.
Truly, you are as strong as you say. Come, rest the night in the giant's lair.
And so the giant took the tailor to a deep cave high in the woods where all the giants lived. And fearsome creatures they were, who spent their nights feasting and their days robbing and terrorizing the people of the kingdom. That night, when the little tailor went to bed, the giants called a meeting.
If he killed 7 in one blow, he might try to kill us.
They decided to be done with the tailor, but the tailor was too smart for them. Instead of sleeping in the bed, he slept in the corner. So that night, when the giants came and hurled his bed over the cliff, the tailor was watching safely from the shadows. The next morning, as the giants congratulated each other on a job well done, who should appear but the tailor? What a fine night's sleep. What's for breakfast?
He lives! He's too strong for us!
And, frightened for their lives, the giants fled the kingdom and were never seen again. Soon everyone heard about the brave little tailor and how he'd saved their kingdom from the giants. The king declared a national holiday. They held a parade through the city and gave him rows of shiny medals. They even built a statue in his honor. On it were the words, "He killed 7 with one blow and rid the kingdom of the giants." At long last, the little tailor was the hero he always dreamed he'd become, and he never had to sew another shirt ever again. The Magic Brush. Long ago, in China, there lived a young boy called Ming. Ming longed to be an artist, but he was too poor to buy paints or brushes, too poor even to go to school in the village with the other children. He had to spend all day out in the fields tending cattle to earn a living. Ming drew on rocks with sticks of charcoal. He drew and drew and drew, and the more he practiced, the more beautiful his drawings became, even though the cows didn't seem to notice. One night, Ming had a strange dream. An old man dressed in shining robes came to him, holding a golden paintbrush.
Take this and paint your wonderful pictures with it. But be careful what you paint, because this is a magic brush.
When Ming woke, he was astonished to find the golden brush in his hand.
My dream was real. How can that be?
But he wasted no time in wondering. He jumped straight out of bed and began to paint, and since he had no canvas, he painted on the walls of his hut. The first thing Ming painted was a beautiful bird. But as he finished, the painting sprang into life, and the bird flew off the wall and away across the fields. Ming was startled.
This can't be happening. I must still be dreaming.
So he painted the fish to see if it would happen again. Sure enough, the fish slid off the wall and into his hands, flapping its tail and gasping for breath. Ming had to run down to the river and quickly put the fish in the water. He spent the rest of that day painting every wall until his hand ached and his yard was filled with so many animals it could take no more. Then Ming remembered something else the old man had said to him.
Only use this brush to help those in need.
And so, as word of his magic painting spread, people from the village came to ask for his help. Ming was happy to oblige them. He painted cars for poor farmers, clothes for beggars, and kites for children. And when there was no rain, he painted a flowing stream so farmers could water their rice paddies. News of his magic brush finally reached the emperor, and Ming was summoned to the palace. The emperor watched as Ming painted a chicken with an egg. The emperor snorted.
Why would I want a chicken? Paint me a mountain of gold so I can be the richest man on earth.
But Ming shook his head. You are already too rich. I only use my brush to help those in need. The emperor was furious.
In that case, I will paint it myself.
He grabbed Ming's brush and had the boy arrested and thrown into prison. The emperor painted gold, jewels, and huge palaces. But he was no artist, and his pictures stayed flat and lifeless, trapped on the paper. He ordered Ming brought before him again.
If you do not obey me, I will keep you in prison forever, and I will punish everyone you've helped.
Now Ming knew he had no choice, but an idea was forming in his mind. I will paint what you wish, but I must paint it my own way. The emperor gave Ming back his brush, and he began to paint. Ming painted a gold mountain, but around it he drew a deep blue sea. The emperor grumbled.
But how will I get to the mountain?
So Ming painted a grand boat for the emperor to sail in. The emperor stepped aboard.
Now paint me a wind to fill the sails.
Certainly, Your Highness. Ming painted a gentle breeze which barely rippled the water, but the boat didn't move.
Lots of wind, fool! The more the better! As you wish.
The boy then painted a wind which sent the clouds racing across the sky. The boat sped off, carrying the emperor toward the mountain. Ming kept on painting. Now he painted the gale which whipped up the seas and darkened the sky. Then a wild storm with thunder, lightning, and towering waves. Soon the storm engulfed the emperor's boat, and it sank, taking the emperor down with it. Finally, Ming painted a clear and bright sky with the sun shining over calm water. Then he put his brush away and went home. From that day on, he only ever used his brush to help those in need, and the world was a much happier place because of it. Why the sea is salty. There was a time, long ago, when the sea was not salty as it is today. Back then, the sea was full of the freshest, sweetest water anyone could drink. And on the shores of that freshwater sea lived a king who was much loved by his people. Like all great kings, he had vast lands and great wealth and a beautiful palace that was known throughout the land. But the king's most prized possession was a rather plain-looking stone hand mill. But this mill was no ordinary mill. This mill had magical powers. Whatever you wished for, you just had to say the word and it would magically appear from the mill. So when the king needed rice to feed his people, he would simply say one word.
Rice!
Instantly, rice would flow from the mill till the grain stores were full. Then the king commanded,
Stop mill!
and not one more grain would flow. And if the king wished for money to buy oxen to pull the ploughs, he would simply shout out,
Gold!
and golden coins would flow from the magic mill till the king commanded it to stop. One day, a traveling bandit heard word of the magic mill.
A mill that produces whatever you command. With this, I could be rich.
And so the bandit decided he must have it for himself. But one look at the king's palace and the bandit knew this would not be easy. The walls of the city were much too high to climb, and you would need your very own army to take the city by force. The bandit racked his brain.
There must be some other way.
And then he had it.
I'll disguise myself as a courtier and walk in through the front gate.
And so it was, a short time later, that the cunning bandit, clothed in the finest silk he could steal, entered the king's palace under the very noses of the guards. Once inside, he looked around at the lords and ladies of the court.
Now to trick them into telling me where the king keeps his mill.
The bandit casually approached some courtiers.
I hear the king doesn't trust any of his people.
What rubbish?
Not so.
I hear he keeps his magic mill in the tower under lock and key.
Nonsense. Everyone knows the mill is by the lotus pool in plain sight of all.
And so, that night, the bandit waited till everyone was asleep. Then he quietly crept out to the lotus pool. There, beneath the beautiful hibiscus tree, he saw his prize.
Ah, the magic mill. Oh, I'll make my fortune.
The bandit seized the mill and began to make his escape through the city. But back at the palace, the king woke from a troubled sleep, sensing something wrong. He rushed to the lotus pool, and there, beneath the hibiscus tree, he found the mill was gone.
Sound the alarm! The thief must be found! Seal up the city! He must not get away!
Down at the harbor, the bandit heard the commotion. Realizing that any escape would now be cut off, he leapt into a rowboat and paddled out far away from shore. Safely out at sea and away from the eyes of the king's army, the bandit laughed with delight as he thought about how rich he would soon become. But what to wish for from the mill? Should he wish gold?
No, too common.
Perhaps silver?
Much too shiny.
And then he had it.
Salt! Everyone needs salt. I'll make tons and become the biggest salt merchant in the world. I'll be even richer than the king.
The bandit stood before the mill and commanded.
Salt! Salt! Make me salt!
His eyes opened wide in amazement as the mill started grinding, salt pouring from the mill and quickly filling up the boat. The bandit was too busy dancing to see the danger. Too late, he felt the boat begin to sink beneath him. He tried to stop the mill, but nothing he could say or do would work. Soon the bandit realized he had no choice but to jump into the water and swim for his life. As you'd expect, the boat sank to the bottom of the sea, the magic mill still churning away, the salt pouring forth endlessly. And that is why, to this very day, the sea is always salty. Ali Baba. Long ago, in Persia, a poor merchant called Ali Baba was walking through the desert collecting firewood to sell. He stopped to rest under a tree when he noticed a gang of thieves riding towards him. Quickly, Ali scurried up the tree to hide. He watched as the tallest and ugliest thief strode towards a large pile of rocks.
Open sesame!
The rocks shuddered, and an enormous boulder slid back, revealing the entrance to a cave. The men disappeared inside. Moments later, they reappeared, laden with heavy bags.
Close sesame!
And the boulder rolled back into place. The men galloped away. Ali climbed down. He slowly approached the boulder and summoned his courage. "Open sesame?" And open it did. Ali nervously stepped inside. The cave was filled with gold and jewels. Ali quickly filled his bags and ran from the cave, careful to utter the magic words as he left. "Close sesame!" Ali hastened home to share his good fortune with his family. But the gold and jewels that Ali brought back were not enough for his greedy brother Kasim. He argued that they should return the next day for more. Ali shook his head. They had plenty to live well. They should be happy with that. But that night, while Ali slept, Kasim saddled up his donkeys and cart and rode to the cave alone. When at last he found it, he shouted,
Open sesame!
And open it did. He drove his mules inside and called out behind him.
Close sesame!
And the rock thundered. Closed. Kasim couldn't load his mules fast enough, but when it came time to leave, greed had muddied his memory. He couldn't remember the secret password.
Open wheat. Open barley. Open quinoa.
But the rock didn't move. In the morning, the thieves returned. They were very angry to find an intruder in the cave. They chained Kasim to the rock wall and rode away. Back in the village, Ali began to worry. He decided to go and check the cave. Once he was sure the coast was clear, he uttered the magic words and went inside. Kasim wept with relief as the two of them drove the mules out of the cave and back home as fast as the poor beast could carry them. When the band of thieves returned to find their prisoner had been rescued and their treasures stolen, they were furious. The captain of the thieves instructed his men to sneak into the nearby village to find which household was celebrating newfound riches. It didn't take long for them to hear the news about Ali Baba, the poor merchant who had just bought the grandest house in town. The next night, the leader of the thieves arrived at Ali's door dressed as an oil merchant. He had with him 39 barrels of oil. Ali graciously welcomed him and asked his slave Morgiana to take the oil cart around to the back courtyard, where they could keep the precious cargo safe. As Morgiana bolted the gate, she thought she heard some whispering, and it seemed to be coming from the barrels of oil. She crept forward, slowly.
When do we attack Ali Baba?
Asked one barrel of oil.
As soon as our leader whistles,
answered another. Morgiana hurried to get a kettle of boiling water, which she poured one by one through the neck of each oil pot. One by one, a scalded thief leapt from the pots, running, screaming into the night. Right after the meal, Ali Baba called her to come inside and perform a dance for them. Morgiana, believing her master was still in danger, hid a large dagger inside her sleeve. As Morgiana danced and twirled, she kept a close eye on the thief. She watched him put his fingers in his mouth and whistle for his men to attack. She watched his face fall when they did not appear. Then, when he reached for his sword, she leapt at him, brandishing the dagger. The thief was so shocked, he dropped his sword and ran off into the night. Ali Baba was dumbstruck. What madness had come over her? Then Morgiana explained what she'd discovered. Ali Baba's anger immediately turned to gratitude. He rewarded her with many precious jewels and, the greatest reward of all, her freedom. And so it was that Ali Baba, Morgiana, and their families lived in comfort and happiness for the rest of their lives. Riki Tufte. Long ago, there was a fairy whose job it was to visit all newborn babies. One day, two queens in neighbouring kingdoms gave birth at the very same moment. One queen gave birth to a girl, Crystal, and though she was very pretty, the fairy could see she was not very smart.
But I'll make her the most beautiful creature the world's ever seen.
There was a blinding flash as the fairy raised her wand, and the baby was given the gift of extraordinary beauty. Across the valley, the fairy flew. The other queen had borne a son, but he was so ugly that upon seeing him she screamed and fainted clear away. The boy's nose was squashed, his eyes were odd, and his forehead sprouted a carrot-coloured tuft of hair. The fairy realized that Riki Tufte also needed some help. With another blinding flash, the fairy declared that Riki would be the smartest person in the kingdom. Still, the queen sobbed, and so the fairy promised to give him a second gift. She flew down and whispered a secret into the baby's ear. So that he would never be lonely, the fairy declared he could choose one other person to be as clever as him. As the children grew, so did their gifts. By the age of 6, Riki Tufte was the court chess champion. But he was still so ugly that no one could bear to look at him. Crystal, though extremely beautiful, was so silly that no one could bear to talk to her. As a result, both children spent many hours alone in the forest. Crystal gathered toadstools as if they were flowers, or talked to trees as if they were people. Riki just lay on his back and watched the birds fly back and forth. Then, as time passed and they both grew older, they accidentally bumped into each other. Riki gasped when he saw Crystal's beauty, but he also sensed her sadness and begged to know her troubles.
I am so stupid. An acorn has more brains than me.
Riki remembered the second gift given to him by the birth fairy. If he could make Crystal clever, he asked, would she consider marrying him? To be clever was everything Crystal had hoped for, so she agreed at once. Riki closed his eyes, concentrated hard, and in an instant...
E equals MC squared.
Riki smiled broadly. Indeed it does. And then Crystal's face fell, remembering what she'd promised in return. Riki saw her hesitation. He told her he'd plan a great wedding feast 1 year from today. If she came, he'd be the happiest man alive. If she did not, he'd understand. Crystal returned home. News of her bright mind quickly spread. Many suitors came, but Crystal, who suddenly yearned for intelligent conversation, found them dull as dishwater. As well, she couldn't forget the promise she'd made to Riki Tufte.
How could anyone as ugly as Riki Tufte expect a girl as beautiful as you to be his wife?
Crystal agreed. Such a thing was impossible. Eventually, the year passed, and from her window, Crystal could see Riki's family preparing the wedding feast down in the forest. Suddenly, the birth fairy appeared on the windowsill.
Why are you so glum? You got the brains you wanted.
Crystal wept with frustration. She desperately wanted to honor her promise, but the idea of spending her life with someone as ugly as Riki Tufte was too horrible to even think about.
When you were born, I gave you a second gift too. But I didn't tell you about it because I couldn't be sure you'd be smart enough to use it wisely.
Crystal wanted to know what this gift was.
The only person who knows about it is Riki Tufte.
Immediately, Crystal ran down to the forest and begged Riki to tell her what he knew. He explained that she'd been given the power to make anyone she chose as beautiful as she was. Crystal was more confused than ever. If Riki knew this, why did he not ask her to make him so? I wanted you to see me for who I really am. His answer was so honest and brave that Crystal instantly fell head over heels in love. From that moment on, Crystal saw Riki differently. He might not be too handsome on the outside, but inside he was kind, polite, helpful, and funny. And of course, very, very smart. To Crystal, Riki Tufte appeared forevermore to be the most magnificent man alive.
The Maiden of the Milky Way. Long ago, on the shores of the Baltic Sea, lived a wise king named Ukko and his beautiful daughter, Lindu. Lindu loved all living creatures, but most of all she loved the birds. Each year as autumn arrived, Lindu stood in the middle of the field giving them help. She would whisper directions for how to fly to warmer climes and then farewell each bird as it flew off. Word spread far of Lindu's beauty and charm, and suitors came from all over the world to ask for her hand in marriage. Night and day a queue of young men stretched all around the castle walls, but none seemed right, and many sadly returned to their homes. One morning, as Lindu headed for the stream, a blazing coach thundered over the horizon. The sun had come to ask for her hand in marriage too. Rays of sunlight poured forth, bearing trunks of sparkling treasures. Lindu was very flattered. She considered the sun's proposal carefully, but finally she shook her head. For while the sun was full of warmth, he followed the same path day after day. She did not think this would suit her. That evening as dusk gathered, the moon drove up in a gleaming silver carriage. Dozens of moonbeams lavished Lindu in pearls and moonstones. Ukko looked on hopefully. Lindu pondered the moon's proposal carefully. But again she shook her head. The moon was certainly beautiful, but it changed its looks too often, and that did not suit her either. Late into the night, as Lindu and Ukko moved through the castle snuffing out the lamps, a brilliant light, ruby and sapphire and emerald, pulsed in through the windows. They ran to the highest point of the castle, flung the windows open and saw the diamond-encrusted coach of the Northern Lights flying by. Lindu fell in love with his beauty immediately and knew that he was the one who should be her lifelong companion. But the Northern Lights felt unworthy of her love. His job was to flash and sparkle in different places and in different ways across the skies, and he never knew where he would be. For months sometimes he couldn't be seen anywhere in the world. Lindu, however, didn't care about this at all. She loved the Northern Lights dearly and promised to wait for him to return, no matter how long it took. The Northern Lights nodded sadly and flashed away into the sky. Lindu carefully prepared a wedding gown and each night walked to the top of the castle and waited for her true love to arrive. She waited and waited and waited, and in time her heart grew heavier and heavier. She wandered down into the fields in her wedding gown, searching the sky for a sign, wishing for the Northern Lights to come and marry her, but alas, he did not. So deep was Lindu's sadness that she no longer helped the birds. And as autumn came, with no one to direct them, the birds flew this way and that, not knowing if they were flying north for summer or south for winter. Finally, in desperation, Ukko called a great council of his wisest advisors to seek a solution to his daughter's grief. The advisors ate and drank and argued heartily. By dawn, they were still no closer to an answer. Then, in through the window swept the winds. They wished to speak. They had an idea. The winds swept down into the meadow where Lindu lay, just where she had fallen asleep. They lifted her up and flew her away into the sky, leaving her sorrows far below. High above the world, Lindu began to feel happy again. By day, she started directing the migration of the birds once more, and as the seasons turned, she was finally reunited with her beloved Northern Lights. They were still unable to marry, but for a few glorious months of the year, they were able to play happily together in the night skies over the Baltic Sea. And while Ukko missed his daughter terribly, he could still gaze up at the night sky and see her wedding dress spread out to form the Milky Way. That was all he needed to know that Lindu once again had a truly happy heart.
Aladdin and the Magic Lamp. Many years ago, there lived a rather lazy boy called Aladdin. Aladdin's father had died, and his poor mother worked hard all day with no help from Aladdin. One day, as Aladdin was idly playing in the street, a mysterious stranger appeared. Aladdin didn't know it, but the stranger was a magician, and he was up to no good. "I knew your father, Aladdin, and if you help me, I can make you rich." Aladdin should have known better than to trust a stranger, but he was young and foolish. He followed the magician up into the mountains and watched as he lit a fire and threw powder on it, muttering magic words. There was a flash of lightning, and the earth cracked open, revealing a dark cave. Aladdin was terrified. "Inside are treasures beyond imagining. Take as much as you like. Just bring me the lamp from the garden." Trembling, Aladdin went down into the cave and found himself in a grand hall opening onto a garden where sparkling jewels hung like fruit from the trees. As he picked the jewels, Aladdin noticed a dusty old lamp. It looked worthless, but he remembered the magician's words, so he gathered it up. But as Aladdin climbed back towards the surface, the earth began to shudder and shake. The magician held out his hand. "Quick, throw me the lamp!" "No, help me out first." Furious, the magician threw more powder onto the fire, and the cave mouth slammed shut, with Aladdin inside. Aladdin sat in the dark and cried, until he remembered the lamp. "Perhaps, if I light it, I will see another way out." As he rubbed the dust off the lamp, there was a thunderclap, and a huge genie appeared. "I am the slave of the lamp. What is your command, O master?" Aladdin stared. He had never been a master of anything before. Can you take me home?" In an instant, Aladdin was home. With the genie's power at his command, Aladdin and his mother were now able to have anything they wanted. As the years passed, Aladdin grew from a selfish boy into a generous young man who always helped the poor, since he remembered being one of them. One day, Aladdin saw a princess passing by in the street and fell deeply in love with her. He went to the Sultan's palace and bowed down before him. "Your Highness, I wish to marry your daughter." "You marry the princess?" Aladdin went home and commanded the genie, "Build me the grandest palace in the kingdom." The next morning, the Sultan looked out of his window and saw a palace twice as big as his own, with Aladdin waving from it. The very next day, Aladdin married the princess. But the magician had heard of Aladdin's good fortune and planned revenge. Disguised as a peddler, he pushed a cart down the street, calling, "New lamps for old! Get new lamps for your old ones here!" Aladdin was away. The princess took the old lamp from the mantelpiece, not realizing its value. She showed it to the peddler.
Will you give me a new lamp for this old thing?
"For you, princess, anything." As soon as the magician had the lamp, he summoned the genie. "Take this palace to my land, now!" Immediately, everything vanished. As soon as Aladdin saw his palace was gone, and the princess with it, he knew it must be the work of the magician. But luckily, palaces are hard to hide. So Aladdin soon found where the magician had taken it. The princess saw Aladdin standing outside her window and was overjoyed.
The magician told me you were dead, and that I must marry him instead.
Aladdin whispered to her that he had a plan. That night, the princess told the magician she would marry him after all. But when the magician called for drinks to celebrate, she sprinkled some powder Aladdin had given her into his glass. The magician fell down dead, and Aladdin jumped inside and grabbed the lamp. He told the genie, "Take us all home!" And instantly, they were back in their own land again. And from that day on, Aladdin, the princess, and the genie lived happily ever after. The Miller and His Donkey. Once upon a time, a miller decided he needed some extra money. He was sick of the neighbours sniggering at his family's shabby clothes. If he sold the family donkey, he would get enough money to buy them new clothes. So, the miller and his son headed off on foot for the journey to market, leading the donkey by a rope. Every now and then they stopped in a shady spot to give the donkey a drink of water and brush the dust off his coat. The miller wanted the donkey to arrive at the market looking his very best, so they would get a good price for it. Two noblemen on horseback came galloping by. They wore fancy riding outfits and beat their horses with riding crutches to make them go faster. When the noblemen saw the miller and his son leading the donkey, they burst out laughing.
Look at those fools. Imagine walking when you could be riding. The stupid donkey must be the one in charge.
As the horsemen rode off, the miller could hear their laughter ringing in his ears. The miller did not like being laughed at, and he didn't want anyone else to think the donkey was in charge. So he told his son to climb up and ride the donkey. They'd gone a little further along the road when they passed by three elderly gents sitting outside a tavern playing checkers. The gents grumbled when they saw the boy riding the donkey while his father walked alongside.
What do you think you're doing, young man? You should get down and let your father ride. Didn't your father teach you to respect your elders?
The miller's face went red with embarrassment. He certainly didn't want anyone to think his son didn't respect him. So he made the boy get down and climbed up to ride the donkey himself, just to please the gents playing checkers. Further along the road, they overtook a group of women carrying baskets of vegetables to market. The women tut-tutted when they saw the miller riding while his son walked.
Oh, look at that mean old fool, perched on the donkey while his poor little boy has to walk.
The miller was so ashamed his face went an even brighter red. He hated the idea that anyone would think he treated his son badly. But how could he please everyone and not look like a fool? He urged the boy to jump up on the donkey behind him. So now, the miller and his son were both riding the donkey along the road to market. On the edge of the town, they passed a mother and her little girl.
Oh, Mother, look! One donkey shouldn't have to carry two people.
The mother agreed it was a cruel way to treat an animal.
Shame on them. They should be carrying the poor creature themselves.
The miller gasped with dismay. Now people thought he was cruel to his animals. That was the last thing he would ever want. But how on earth could he get his donkey to market without someone thinking he was foolish, mean, or cruel? In a great panic, he jumped down from the donkey and pulled his son down too. They tried carrying the animal in their arms, but that was too difficult. So instead, they cut a pole from a nearby tree and used the rope to tie the donkey to it by its hooves. And that's the way the miller and his son carried the donkey upside down into the market. As soon as the villagers saw the ridiculous sight of two people carrying a donkey slung from a pole, they roared with laughter. In fact, they cackled so loudly that the poor donkey was terrified. He kicked and brayed until the ropes came undone and he fell to the ground. The donkey scrambled onto its hooves and galloped off into the woods. And that's where he lived happily for the rest of his life. Sadly, there was nothing the miller and his son could do but trudge back to the mill cottage. When they arrived home, their clothes were filthier and even more shabby from their journey. The miller's wife demanded an explanation. Why had they brought back no new clothes, no money, and no donkey? The miller simply shook his head. When you try to please everybody, you end up pleasing nobody. The Monkey and the Crocodile. One day, a hungry crocodile was swimming up and down a wide river hunting for something to eat. He spotted a little monkey sitting on the riverbank eating mangoes. The monkey ate mangoes until his stomach was stretched tight and as round as a ball. It just so happens that monkey is the tastiest snack in the world for a crocodile. So when the monkey went down to the water's edge to wash the sticky mango juice off his hands, the crocodile was waiting. He hid in the reeds that grew along the riverbank, ready to grab the little monkey. But just as the monkey got close, he took a step back. He knew crocodiles swam in that river and he didn't want to be eaten. The clever little monkey whispered into the reeds, "If there is anyone hiding in these reeds, he should keep silent. But if there's nobody hiding here, he should call out, 'Nobody here!'" The crocodile wasn't so clever, so he called out, "Nobody here." The monkey fell about laughing.
You silly crocodile!
The crocodile was angry. He gnashed his huge jaws and thrashed his powerful spiny tail in the water, but it was no use. The little monkey danced around on the shore, safe and out of reach. The crocodile decided he wanted revenge, so he came up with a plan to outsmart the monkey. The next day, the crocodile swam up and said a friendly good morning to the monkey. He smiled, flashing his rows of sharp teeth. The monkey took a step back from the riverbank, just to be on the safe side. The crocodile told the monkey about the juicy mangoes that grew on an island in the middle of the river. The monkey looked across the water and saw the tree with its tasty gold fruit, the most delicious-looking mangoes he'd ever seen. But everyone knows that monkeys aren't very good swimmers, so there was no way the monkey could get across the river to reach the mangoes. The crocodile smiled again.
What a shame I have no hands to reach up and pluck the fruit from that tree. With your nimble monkey fingers you could easily pick it, but alas, you can't swim.
He offered the monkey a deal. The crocodile promised to carry him across the river on his back if the monkey would give him half the fruit. The monkey didn't trust the crocodile. He knew that crocodiles liked nothing better than snacking on monkeys, but he so desperately wanted to eat those juicy mangoes, so he decided to take the chance. The monkey hopped onto the crocodile's scaly back and sailed towards the mango tree island. But as soon as they got near the middle of the river, the crocodile twisted his tough, leathery body and plunged the monkey into the water. The monkey screamed for the crocodile to stop, but the crocodile just laughed.
Ha ha ha! I outsmarted you. Everyone knows that crocodiles don't eat mangoes. I want to eat you, and especially your juicy red heart.
Feeling hugely pleased with himself and thinking he tricked the monkey into being his next meal, the crocodile opened his massive jaws ready to swallow him in one gulp. But the monkey quickly called out, "You want to eat my juicy red heart? Oh dear, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I left my heart on the riverbank to keep it safe while I climbed the tree." The crocodile was cross. He demanded that the monkey hand over his heart ready to be eaten. The monkey sighed. "Well, since you've outsmarted me, I suppose I'll have to. But you must carry me back to the riverbank so I can fetch my heart." The crocodile carried the monkey back to the riverbank. As soon as the monkey was safely on shore, he danced around, laughing. "You silly crocodile! Everyone knows you can't leave your heart behind." The crocodile was boiling mad. That monkey had made a complete fool of him again. No matter how hard he tried, the crocodile could never manage to trick the clever monkey into being his dinner. Mind you, the monkey had no way to reach the mango tree island, so whenever he looked across the river at the juicy mangoes hanging on the branches, he could only dream about how delicious they tasted.